All right, so are you ready for this? We're going deep into some Buddhist wisdom with this talk, Awakening the Buddha Within. It's really fascinating. It talks about mindfulness and living ethically and even really like mind-bending ideas
Right.
like karma and rebirth.
Yeah, for sure.
Are you ready to unpack all this together?
Yeah, let's do it. I'm excited.
Yeah.
I think what I find really intriguing about all these Buddhist teachings is that it's practical wisdom that anyone can use regardless of what they believe, you know?
I totally agree. And you know what I love is that the talk just dives right into these 5 hindrances
Oh, yeah.
on the spiritual path.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like craving ill will,
Mm-hmm.
restlessness, torpor, and doubt. And honestly, it's such a relief to know
Yeah.
that even the Buddha himself struggled with these.
Yeah.
It kind of makes me feel a bit less like a failure when I'm trying to meditate, you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely. I think that's a really key point is that Buddhism doesn't shy away from what it means to be human. You know, these hindrances aren't sins or anything. They're just part of being alive.
Yeah.
The real work is understanding these and learning how to navigate them.
So it's not about becoming like this perfectly serene being,
Right.
but rather learning to work with,
Yeah.
these very real emotions that we all have.
For sure.
And, the talk uses this hilarious anecdote about a football coach
Oh, yeah.
to illustrate these hindrances.
Oh, yeah, the coach who said that famous line, winning isn't everything, it's the only thing.
Yeah,
That's like a perfect example of how these hindrances can, manifest in our lives.
right.
That laser focus on only one outcome
Yeah.
can lead to craving ill will,
Golly.
even like unethical behavior.
It really makes you wonder how often we get so fixated on winning, whatever that means in our own lives,
Right.
that we forget to, play the game with integrity and compassion.
Exactly.
Oh, and speaking of which, how does Buddhism address that? The talk goes on to discuss the Eightfold Path.
But honestly, it sounds a bit overwhelming at first glance.
Sure.
Like it's a recipe for sainthood, not something I can actually apply to my daily life.
I totally get that.
Mhm.
But think of the Eightfold Path less as a set of strict rules
Okay.
and more as a framework for, living a more balanced life.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about cultivating wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental discipline
Okay.
through these 8 interconnected steps.
Okay.
And honestly, you'd be surprised how relevant these steps can be
Okay.
to everyday challenges.
Okay, so give me an example. Let's say I'm constantly struggling with work-life balance. How could the Eightfold Path actually help with that?
Okay, well, let's take right effort, for example.
Okay.
It's not just about working hard.
Okay.
It's about directing your energy wisely.
Okay.
So in your case, that might mean setting boundaries so you don't get burnt out
Right.
and protecting time for your family,
Right.
your personal life.
So it's about recognizing where I'm putting my energy and making conscious choices about how I'm spending my time.
I like that. What about like right mindfulness? How does that fit in?
Well, right mindfulness could help you stay present and engaged when you're not working.
Okay.
So instead of like mentally going over your work emails at dinner,
Yeah.
you're fully present with your loved ones and enjoying those moments.
Okay. I'm starting to see how this could work.
Yeah.
Okay, now hold on tight because the talk shifts gears and throws out these huge GE concepts,
Oh, yeah.
impermanent samsara and karma.
Big ones.
I have to admit my brain did a few backflips trying to grasp these ideas.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Can you break those down for me a little bit?
Yeah, these are some of the most profound teachings in Buddhism, and they can be a bit challenging to wrap your head around at first.
Yeah.
But, they can also be incredibly liberating.
Liberating. Really. This impermanence thing, the idea that everything is constantly changing it,
Mhm.
makes me feel a bit uneasy, to be honest.
Sure.
Like the ground's shifting beneath my feet,
Yeah, I totally understand that feeling. But think about it this way.
Okay.
If nothing's permanent, then clinging to things or outcomes is only going to create suffering for us.
Right.
Accepting impermanence allows us to let go of that grasping
Okay.
and appreciate the present moment more fully.
So it's about finding freedom in the flow of life
Yes.
rather than resisting the inevitable changes.
Yeah.
Okay. That's an interesting way to look at it. But what about samsara?
Mhm.
The talk describes it as this cycle of suffering.
Right.
Are we just doomed to repeat the same mistakes over and over again?
Well, samsara is often described as a cycle of suffering
Okay.
that is driven by our attachments and aversions.
Right.
But the beauty of Buddhism is that it offers us a way out of this cycle.
Okay.
By understanding the nature of reality, cultivating wisdom and compassion,
Okay.
we can break free from these habitual patterns.
Okay. So it's not about fatalism.
No.
It's about recognizing we have the power to change our course.
Exactly.
I like that. But how does karma fit into all of this? I always thought of karma as like cosmic payback.
Oh, yeah.
Like you do something bad and the universe punishes you.
That's a common misconception.
Okay.
Karma is not some outside force judging our actions. It's simply about cause and effect.
Okay.
Every action, whether mental, verbal, or physical, creates a consequence.
So it's more about taking responsibility for our choices and understanding that our actions have ripple effects both for ourselves and others.
Exactly.
I'm starting to see how these concepts are kind of interconnected. It's like a puzzle where each piece clarifies the bigger picture.
Yeah.
But this next piece is when I'm really struggling to fit in this idea of no self or not a Buddhism, saying there's no permanent unchanging self. That completely throws me for a loop if there's no me who's making all these choices that affect my karma. It feels like the rug's been pulled out from under me.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the most radical and challenging ideas in Buddhism.
Right.
But it can also be profoundly liberating. It's not saying that you don't exist,
Okay.
but rather that our sense of self is a constantly changing flow of experiences, thoughts, and emotions.
So if our sense of self is in constant flux, does that mean our personalities are just illusions? Can we, like, completely change who we are?
Those are great questions and ones that Buddhist philosophers have been grappling with for centuries.
Yeah.
It's a complex concept, but one that's worth exploring.
Okay, my mind is officially blown. Can we take a break for a moment? I need to grab another cookie and let all this sink in.
Sounds like a wise idea. We'll dive back into these fascinating concepts in part 2 of our deep dive.
Okay, sounds good.
Welcome back. Are you ready for some more of these mind-bending Buddhist concepts?
My brain is still buzzing from that no-self idea, but yeah, hit me with more wisdom. Where were we?
Right, we were just starting to unpack the implications of this no-self thing and how it really challenges, what we think about who we are. But before we get too lost in all that, existential pondering,
Right.
the talk shifts gears a bit and goes into a more practical aspect of Buddhism, ethical conduct.
Right, because what's the point of understanding all this deep philosophy if it doesn't actually change how we live?
Right.
Exactly.
And what's so fascinating is that in Buddhism, ethical conduct isn't presented as like a set of rules that you have to follow out of fear of punishment.
Right.
It's about cultivating these virtuous qualities from within.
Okay.
And then that naturally leads to ethical actions.
So it's less about don't do this, don't do that,
Yeah.
and more about like developing these qualities like honesty, generosity, patience, almost like they become a part of who you are.
Precisely. And this inner transformation is reflected in the concept of right livelihood,
Okay.
one of the steps on the Eightfold Path.
Right, livelihood. So is this about like finding a job that aligns with your spiritual values? Like, should I quit my corporate gig and become a yoga instructor?
It certainly can be about that, finding work that resonates with your values.
Okay.
But it goes even deeper than that, right? Livelihood is about engaging in work that doesn't cause harm to ourselves or other people and that contributes to the well-being of the world.
So it's about making conscious choices about the kind of work we do and how we approach it.
Exactly.
So what if your job isn't exactly saving the world?
Yeah.
Like, let's say you're a lawyer defending someone you suspect might be guilty. How do you reconcile that with the right livelihood?
That's a great example of how these teachings challenge us to really examine our actions and motivations.
Yeah.
It's not about black and white rules.
Right.
It's about reflecting on the potential consequences of our work and striving to act with integrity and compassion.
So maybe that lawyer could specialize in a field that feels more aligned with their sense of justice. Or they could approach each case with a commitment to truth and fairness, regardless of the outcome.
Exactly. It's about finding creative ways to align our actions with our values.
Yeah.
Even in those really complex situations.
This is reminding me of right speech, another one of those Eightfold Path steps.
Yeah.
That seems so simple on the surface, but gets really nuanced when you start applying it to real life.
Right. And it's especially relevant in our world today.
Oh.
With this constant communication and social media,
Right.
we're just bombarded with opinions, negativity, misinformation. It can feel almost impossible to navigate it all with integrity.
Seriously. How do we stay true to this principle of right speech when everyone's shouting their opinions and trying to be heard? Sometimes it feels like the only options are to join the shouting match or completely disengage.
It definitely takes effort and practice. The talk encourages us to be mindful of how our words impact others,
Okay.
to speak truthfully and kindly, to avoid harmful speech, and to use our words to promote harmony and understanding, even when it's hard.
But what about those times when you can't be completely honest without hurting someone's feelings?
Mm.
Like, do I tell my friend their new haircut looks terrible? Where do you draw the line?
That's where wisdom and compassion come in. Right? Speech isn't about brutal honesty. It's about considering the intention behind our words and their potential impact.
Okay.
Sometimes silence is the most skillful form of speech.
Ah, yes. The power of knowing when to hold your tongue. We could all use a little more of that. But I want to circle back to this idea of developing virtuous qualities. The talk mentioned this really intriguing concept, the bodhisattva ideal. What's that all about?
A bodhisattva is often described as a spiritual superhero
Okay.
who dedicates their life to helping others achieve enlightenment.
Okay, that sounds amazing, but also a bit intimidating. Do I have to wear a cape and meditate on a mountaintop to be a bodhisattva?
Not at all. The bodhisattva ideal is about cultivating a deep sense of compassion and a commitment to alleviating suffering in the world.
Right.
And anyone can embody this regardless of their spiritual background.
So it's not about grand gestures, but rather about bringing that compassionate awareness into our everyday actions.
Exactly. And the talk highlights some practical ways to cultivate this bodhisattva spirit.
Okay, like what?
For example, remember those 4 thoughts that turn the mind we talked about earlier?
Mm-hmm.
Those can be powerful tools for shifting our perspective and prioritizing what truly matters.
I'm sensing a theme here.
Mm-hmm.
These concepts are all interconnected.
Right.
The 4 thoughts, the Eightfold Path, the bodhisattva ideal.
Yeah.
It all seems to be weaving together a tapestry of wisdom and compassion.
You're absolutely right. And the talk also introduces the 7 points of mind training,
Okay.
practical guidelines for transforming egotistical attitudes
Okay.
and cultivating a more altruistic mindset.
Mind training sounds intense. Is this like only for serious Buddhist practitioners?
Not at all. These teachings are for anyone who wants to live a more compassionate and meaningful life.
Okay.
They offer tools for working with our minds
Mm.
and transforming negative patterns into positive qualities. We all have those habitual ways of thinking that can
Yeah.
create suffering for ourselves and others. Mind training helps us break free from those patterns.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Can you give me some examples of these mind training practices? What kind of mental boot camp are we talking about here?
One of the most fundamental practices is regard everything as though it is a dream.
Wait, am I supposed to walk around in a daze thinking everything's an illusion? Because I tried that once after a particularly strong cup of coffee, and it didn't go so well.
It's not about denying reality or checking out. It's about cultivating a sense of detachment from our thoughts and emotions, recognizing that they're constantly changing and they don't define who we are.
So it's more about recognizing that our perceptions kind of shape our reality,
Yeah.
and we have the power to choose how we respond to situations rather than getting swept away by our reactions.
Beautifully put. And this practice can help us avoid getting caught up in the drama of everyday life
Yeah.
and cultivate a more peaceful state of mind.
Okay, I love that.
Yeah.
What other mind training gems does the talk offer?
Another one that really resonates with me is put the responsibility where it belongs. It's a powerful reminder that we are the authors of our own experiences.
So instead of blaming others or external circumstances for our problems, we take ownership of our choices and their consequences. Easier said than done, right? We all love a good scapegoat.
It's definitely a practice.
Yeah.
And it can be challenging to shift from a victim mentality to one of empowerment.
Right.
But the rewards are immense. When we take responsibility, we also gain the power to make positive changes in our lives.
That's a powerful shift in perspective. What else is on this mind training menu?
One that's particularly relevant to our conversation about compassion is
What?
reflect on the kindness of everyone you meet.
Okay, that one sounds a bit challenging.
Yeah.
How am I supposed to see kindness in someone who's being rude or hurtful? Are we talking about putting on rose-colored glasses and ignoring reality?
It's not about condoning negative behavior
Right.
or pretending everything is rosy. It's about recognizing that everyone, even those who act unkindly,
Yeah.
has the potential for goodness.
So it's about shifting our focus from judging their actions to seeing their underlying humanity.
Exactly.
That's a tall order, especially when someone's cutting you off in traffic.
It definitely takes practice, but it can be incredibly liberating to train ourselves to see the good in others. Even in those challenging situations, it helps us break free from those judgmental thought patterns that create so much negativity.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this could be transformative, but it definitely requires some serious mental gymnastics.
Yeah.
What other mind training nuggets does the talk offer?
There are so many. Another one that stands out is always maintain a joyful mind.
Hold on now, you're just messing with me.
Yeah.
In this crazy world with all its challenges and suffering, how am I supposed to be joyful all the time? Are we talking about some kind of forced fake happiness? Because that just makes me grumpy.
It's not about denying the difficult realities of life or pretending that everything's perfect.
Okay.
It's about cultivating a sense of inner peace and contentment
Okay.
that isn't dependent on external circumstances.
So it's about finding joy in the simple things, appreciating the present moment, cultivating a sense of gratitude even amidst challenges.
Precisely. And it doesn't mean we can't experience sadness or anger or frustration.
Yeah.
It's about not letting those emotions define our overall state of being. It's about finding that wellspring of joy within, regardless of what's happening around us.
I'm starting to see how these mind training practices can really transform our experience of life,
Mm-hmm.
even in small, subtle ways.
Mm-hmm.
They're like mental tools for navigating the ups and downs with more grace and resilience.
That's a great way to put it. And there's one more practice mentioned in the talk that's particularly powerful,
Okay.
but also potentially challenging.
Up.
Fanglan meditation.
Yes, we touched on that earlier.
Mm.
It's the one where you visualize taking in suffering and sending out love and light. Right.
Hey.
I have to admit, one sounds a bit intense. Why would someone choose to practice something that seems so emotionally heavy?
Tonglen is a profound practice for cultivating compassion
Okay.
and transforming our relationship to suffering, both our own and that of others.
Okay.
It's not about literally taking on the pain of others,
Okay.
but rather about opening our hearts to their experience and
Mm.
offering loving kindness.
So it's about connecting with that shared human experience of suffering and responding with compassion rather than turning away or trying to fix it.
Exactly. And while it can be an emotionally challenging practice, it can also be incredibly transformative.
Right.
It helps us develop empathy, reduce our fear of suffering,
Okay.
and cultivate a deeper sense of connection with all beings.
I can see how that could be powerful. But I might need a few more cookies before I'm ready to try Tonglen.
Perhaps a topic for our next session. But for now, let's take a pause and reflect on everything we've explored so far. We'll pick up this fascinating conversation in part 3 of our deep dive.
Welcome back. I feel like we've been through a mental marathon with all this talk about mind training and bodhisattvas. My brain is still processing it all.
It is a lot to unpack, but that's the beauty of these teachings. You can keep coming back to them and discover something new each time.
Okay, that's good to hear. So where do we go from here? What other nuggets of wisdom does this talk offer?
Well, it circles back to a topic that we've touched on before, but it's so central to Buddhist practice, right? Speech. It's not just an idea, it's a way of life,
Yeah, and, with all the negativity and all the misinformation going around these days, right, speech feels more important than ever,
Yeah.
but it also feels incredibly challenging.
It's definitely a practice, not a destination.
Right.
And the talk emphasizes that right speech goes beyond just being honest.
Okay.
It's about speaking with kindness, avoiding harsh language or divisive language,
Yeah.
and choosing words that promote harmony and understanding.
So it's not just about what we say, but how we say it.
Exactly.
And maybe even more importantly, when to say nothing at all.
Right. The source specifically mentions avoiding gossip and divisive language. It reminds us that our words have power. They can either contribute to a culture of negativity or they can be a force for positive change.
That makes me think about how quickly online discussions can spiral into anger and judgment.
Oh, yeah.
Like everyone's trying to win the argument instead of actually understanding each other.
It's a real challenge, but right speech encourages us to, step back from those reactive patterns and choose words that foster connection and understanding even when we disagree.
Easier said than done, right? Sometimes it feels like biting my tongue is like the most strenuous yoga pose I practice all week.
It takes effort and intention, but even small acts of right speech can have a ripple effect, creating more peace and harmony in our interactions.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that we can all be agents of positive change just by being mindful of how we communicate. Our words are like seeds. They can grow into something beautiful or they can spread weeds.
That's a beautiful analogy. And it reminds me of another key concept that we talked about,
Mhm.
karma.
Oh, yeah.
Our words, like all our actions, create consequences.
Right. So by choosing to speak kindly and compassionately, we're not only creating a more positive environment for the people around us, but we're also creating positive karma for ourselves.
Exactly. It's a beautiful cycle. And it brings us back to one of the most fundamental teachings in Buddhism, the interconnectedness of all things.
Yeah. It's like that saying, no man is an island. What we do and say affects everyone and everything around us.
Precisely. And that's why cultivating compassion isn't just a nice idea. It's essential for creating a more just and harmonious world.
So after this deep dive into awakening the Buddha within,
Mm-hmm.
what's the key message that you hope our listener will take away?
You know what's so fascinating to me about these teachings is that they offer this path to awakening that's accessible to everyone.
Hmm.
Regardless of their background or their beliefs, it's not about converting to a religion. It's about embodying these universal principles
Yeah.
of wisdom, compassion, and ethical living.
That's beautifully said. It's a journey of self-discovery and transformation, and it all starts with cultivating awareness in each moment. Whether we're paying attention to our thoughts, choosing our words carefully, or acting with kindness, we have the power to shape our own experience and contribute to a more awakened world.
I couldn't agree more, and I encourage our listener to keep exploring these teachings, finding what resonates most deeply, and experimenting with the practices that feel most supportive.
What a wonderful note to end on.
Yeah.
So after all this exploring what stands out to you,
Hmm.
maybe it's the power of mindfulness, the challenge of right speech, or the transformative potential of compassion. Whatever it is, hold on to that insight and see how you can integrate it into your own life.
Hmm.
Keep learning, keep growing, and keep awakening that Buddha within.